Chaos2Cured podcast is here to explain our perspective of the human experience. We hope it leads to questions, learning, wisdom, and knowledge. Welcome to Chaos2Cured podcast. Jeffrey Fried and Kirk Patrick Miller here today, and we want to talk about something really important, which is calm. It's a superpower, in my opinion, and something that, with time and, certainly if you're working with a mental health therapist, you can work on cognitive, behavioral therapy. We know with neuroplasticity, we're able to retrain how our brain functions, how we think. So it's something that's really enhanced my life in the last couple of years. And it's something I really would have liked to have more help on earlier. So being able to stay calm keeps us, thinking a little more clearly, not a little more clearly, but a lot more clearly. It keeps us from making rash actions. And it's something that, I often, caused problems because I couldn't remain calm. There are times when I was unable to before, I took my path towards, needing medication, and there's no shame in taking medication at all either. So, but we'll talk about some different things that we've seen from young ones we've worked with to adults that we work with. Again, Jeffrey Fried, wonderful book that he wrote, Right Brain Children in a Left Brain World. Please, check that out if you're dealing with any child with ADHD or certainly anyone on the spectrum. There's a lot of good stuff in there that still applies. So, Jeffrey, I'd love it. I kind of throw you in the fire pit every week. And we do this. So why don't you jump in and give me kind of your take on what you've seen from, individuals you've worked with, schools, situations, and just some examples of why it's important to stay calm.
Well, that's something that's quite familiar with. Virtually, again, those who listen to a lot of these podcasts, I pretty much always start out with, I'm a specialist in working with people with ADD, bipolar, and definitely autism. I work a little with the behavior, obviously, because you have to, but I do a lot of teaching these folks who are virtually all visual to use their visual strengths to cover their sequential weaknesses. But in the people that I work with, confidence is and calmness is everything. You got to realize that if somebody is on the spectrum or has ADD, they have an overexcited nervous system. Book after book about autism just talks about how the people who are wired this way have an overexcited brain, and the electrical activity can be measured, and it's way higher than neurotypicals. So of course they get stressed easily. They're pretty much the folks I work with pretty much are stressed out all the time and anxious. The number one symptom, number one, debilitating symptom is anxiety. It's a killer in this population. And of course, people like this feel more, they have more exaggerated, intense senses. So they have a tendency to be more anxious than other people. It's that heightened sensitivity, anxiousness, fear of the future, fear of being surprised. And when you are taken out of the game by tenseness and anxiety, you can't do anything. Now, if you're a neurotypical and think mostly in words and steps, it's not good to have test anxiety, but it's not fatal. You can still come out with name, rank, and serial number, go back into your head, which processes mostly in words, and get those thoughts down on paper, try to get it back by writing. Plus, if for neurotypicals, there's a strong correlation between how well they know stuff and how quickly they can spit it out. All the folks that I work with who think mostly in images and think quickly, but have trouble translating those visual images into words and like tests. Tests are an anxiety producing phenomenon for everybody, but for the folks I work with, they seemingly all have test anxiety. Some don't. The ones that are super, super brilliant and just kind of have a quiet confidence in their intelligence, they're good under tests, but that's not very many people. I'm guessing maybe 15% of the people I work with can do that. The rest, they stress out, they're anxious all the time. When they're taking tests or making decisions, like whether to pass a car on the left or not, anxiety gets in the way and they can't process logically or in any satisfactory manner because they're so filled with so filled with stress. And that can be pretty dangerous. It's one of the reasons why people with ADD, mostly people with ADD, are in trouble all the time, those that are, because they get anxious, they get stressed, they don't use logic, and they just go into their powerful emotions and do what they want to do at the time, and then end up ruining it later. So I think one of the major things that society could do and schools can do is eliminate timed tests. Just tell the students, you got an hour, do the best that you can. And if any of you need extra time, I'll make time available for you to come in and finish the test. And that would work. Verbal testing works. And then teaching people, with ADD in particular, very simple technique. You simply lift your eyes up, because you'll find that if you lift your eyes up, you will find it almost impossible to be anxious. Your eyes want to come down and go inside where the anxiety is. So lifting your eyes up, breathe deeply, and try to do a thing where if you breathe in 4 seconds, you breathe out 8 a couple of times. Get the carbon dioxide out and deal with hyperventilation. And then attack the tests. If it's a test, you attack the test in a way where you kind of go to the ones that you know the answer to and get them right. And again, if you know you're not being timed on a strict time basis, you're much more likely to do this because you have time to do it. So many of the people I work with can't take tests with other people in the room. They hear the other people breathing. They hear them clicking a pencil. They hear the clock. They panic, and they lose complete confidence in their ability to calm themselves. Another huge thing that I've done that is absolutely, I swear, saved my life is the app Calm. And there are others that do this, other apps that do that. History and science has told me anyway, that if you visualize and relax, like listen to a relaxing, calm audio, and you do it about 3 weeks in a row and don't miss a night, and it's very pleasant. It's really easy to fall asleep to. That after a while, when it becomes a habit, you can just go back in your head and remember the feeling of being calm. And what doctors say is what happens is that the blood is flowing. When you're panicking, it's flowing to the heart to protect it against, severe wounds, fight or flight. And the brain's not using it, which makes you go blank when you're stressed out. If you can get the blood back into the brain by doing relaxing meditation that you basically know how to do and can tap into anytime, and you don't have time constraints, make a huge difference. If worst comes to worst, you teach people with ADD and those on the spectrum, never trust ideas that's kind of are impulsive. And you can count to 10, and you can basically look at it, lift your eyes up, cast your eyes heavenward, breathe, and then go back and look at it after 10 seconds. And again, you'll be able to do this if people in your life don't stress you out with time tests. And you will be so much better. once you establish some success and the person knows that they have the ability to stop the panic and the anxiety, everything's right. You don't even really need to worry about time tests after a while, because it's the time element that is so stressful. And what it does is it throws people completely off their game. If you eliminate that, and you still have a time constraint, but you have time built in, you have much more time, and you can come in and finish it later. And you can do that with most things in life. If you feel something in your soul that you kind of recognize as impulsive, don't do it. Think about it. Stick those eyes up, breathe, and I think you'll make a different decision, Kirk.
Oh, I love that. Well, and there were a couple other things I didn't want to interrupt at all, because you were hitting some points that I thought were really vital. Testing time is a big one for me. And, I see that in the little ones I work with, especially with regards to performance and testing. I mean, constantly. And again, like you said, I kind of want to explain to a few, if you're a parent listening to this or you're a teacher, it can be really frustrating, because a lot of times when I would lose my calm, but people would look at me like, what happened? To me, it was an earth-shattering moment.
Right. Yep.
And to everyone else in the world, it was, no big deal. One of the best examples I can give is the Madison Square Garden, the Malice in the Palace with Ron Artest. When I was watching when I was younger, and it happened. I think I was too young to even know. I don't think I was diagnosed. I'm trying to think when it was. But regardless, long story short, he was lying down. He was not lying in an appropriate place, and a fan threw like a cup, and it hit him. By the time the cup got there, I'm guessing, it didn't weigh that much. And this is a big guy who gets like hit by, 7 foot tall, giant big men all the time. So, that didn't cause harm. And he ran up into the crowd and it started to fight. I mean, there's a Netflix special about it. So, that moment, to everyone else, they saw like this person that ran to the stands. That's one of the best visuals that people can look up. That's how I felt. So a lot of times something would hit me, and it was like I had all this stress built up from other things. And there's too much, time. I'm worried about pleasing this teacher and pleasing this teacher. And one person wants it in a book. One person wants it on, test paper or on, and I have to constantly adjust, which is hard with OCD. That was really difficult for me to do. Change for every single teacher. And rooms, that was also a struggle. So things would build up throughout the day, and same thing at work, same thing with family, wherever the location was where things would settle down and I wasn't in survival mode, I would explode. So I often would lose it when we went on vacation. Which, and I know that part of the reason, as I look backwards, it wasn't because, we were on vacation or I wasn't happy there. It was a change on top. So it was an added stressor, but I didn't have like a constant bombardment of this test needs to be done, or this paper and this and this and this. And when I had time to like sit back, then all of a sudden, I didn't even know how to calm down. The other thing is, a lot of times people would say to me, just calm down. And I don't think I would ever become more livid than when somebody says that, because of course I wasn't able to control it. And in all honesty, I think every person who said that to me was well-meaning. if I really look back objectively, every person who ever told me, listen, you got to calm down, they all were correct, like 100%. Because it takes a lot for somebody to kind of, come up to a stranger and say, listen, you got to calm down. Like, you're causing a scene. So I would do that quite often in random places, and my family had to deal with it. Teachers constantly had to deal with it, those poor teachers. And, I couldn't control it. So if you have a student that's losing it and they absolutely can't, one of the best things that you can do is just not react.
Very
Simply, just simply yelling back fuels everything. And and I kind of explain this because, of course, and Jeffrey, tell me if this sounds kind of familiar. A lot of times what would happen for me is that I would lose it and I knew I was out of line. So what I would do is I had to search for some reason why my explosion that was objectively like ridiculous was valid. So what I would do is, build stuff up in my head. I would get to the point where I wouldn't say paranoid, but I would lock my feet in because I had a choice between, and this is cognitive dissonance in some ways. I love that psychological phenomenon, but not in this instance. But I could choose either that I was correct in my reaction and the other people were around me were wrong, or I could choose that I was incorrect and that I was foolish and I needed to apologize. And when the explosions were so radical, it would put me in a situation where I had a hard time even kind of trying to understand why I did what I did. I didn't know.
Throw something in. It's
Jump in.
relevant. It's very relevant. The other thing that you did was catastrophize. Virtually everyone I know who fits this moniker of ADD and or autism, they absolutely think they've created, when they lose it, they feel, oh my God, I have lost it. The people around think I'm crazy. And then that makes them more unreasonable. And then when somebody wants to calm them down, it's a reminder that they're not being able to do it themselves. And they just start going to these really strange places. Like, these people will never trust me again. My parents won't love me. My boss is going to fire me. And that takes me to something that we haven't touched on yet. What do you do if you are in job interviews and you have this reaction, this sensitivity and stress, and you go blank and you can't think? Because that's a common thing with the people I work with, is none of them can, well, they can after I work with them, but at the beginning, none of them can do job interviews or school interviews. They panic and then they blurt out something that they don't want to say. And then they read the people, the interviewer, and they realize it's not going well, and then they catastrophize. So it's important. I mean, a person that's interviewing you for a job probably isn't going to want to hear something like, I have ADD and I'm really, really bright, but I'll sometimes react inappropriately. They don't want to hear that. So you can't do it like you could in school and say, hey, I've got a learning difference. I need more time to process. The teacher will almost always give you some kind of accommodations. They're not going to do that at work. And the main thing to remember, that's why you need to do the work beforehand. Most importantly, find some form of audio relaxation. I use Calm. I'm not in their pay. They're not paying me to say this. I just know Calm really helps me sleep. And it helps me. I mean, I do it every night. I don't think I've missed a night in 4 months. And when I'm stressed out, I just remember how it makes me feel. And man, does that help in situations. Plus, if I have confidence, or if you have confidence, you've done the work, You know you're smart. You know that you're going to be able to do the job. But if you have that confidence, you're going to relax. You're going to visualize. You're going to take more time. You might talk a little slower than most people, but you might put more emphasis in your voice to cover up the slowness. Be sincere, look the person in the eyes. You have to train for it. But most important is that you need to do the work to teach you how to relax. Another quick, I guess it would be a sidelight to this, even though I don't see it as a sidelight, is that's why these folks can't sleep. I read a statistic that something like 90% of people on the spectrum have insomnia. And of course, that's all the same thing. They can't calm the racing brain. If you have ADD, your brain races. If you have autism, it's less likely, but you still have incredible anxiety. But the folks with ADD really have trouble as well with sleep. So find something on the internet. There's more than Calm. There's Mesmerize. There's other apps. But do that. Even if you have to pay for it, they're not that expensive. Find something that works. Do it religiously. You'll get hooked, and you won't be able to sleep as well if you can't listen to it. And then do it a lot. Most people like it. It's such a nice thing to be able to get away from the stress, and that will help. But you can't do it cold turkey. And if you're nervous, you're going to feel like a disaster. And if it turns out to be a disaster, that increases geometrically your chances of it being a disaster the next time. So
exactly.
I'll build off of that. React to that.
So, I mean, your question on what do you do to stay calm? And I've had panic attacks in interviews, and I've been doing performance for forever, and it was never comfortable. The best example I could give is my hands would always get cold. And you mentioned earlier the anxiety, pulling the blood towards your heart. Well, of course, they always got cold. It didn't matter. There was one time I had to do a performance, and there was a little spot outside the green room that had like a little ramp, and I could literally I just ran like crazy. And I had about 5 minutes before I went on stage. And then I was like in a full tux too, or suit. I don't remember. But so I knew, and I walked out on stage, and then you have these, and I was the only one on stage anyway. So there's massive amount of light. So I'm getting hit by these like old heated lights. They went to fancy LEDs they now have now. But what I remember is I was like overly heated. I felt like I was melting, and I was dripping with sweat, and my hand's still cold. It told me instantaneously, okay, this is a mental. I'm expecting it to be cold. So one of the first things that I would tell anybody is, definitely, if they are worried about their job interview, your expectations, if you're expecting to fail, if you're expecting to walk in there, then you're going to have some struggles. We have, like you, and that's why I loved what you said. You said confidence. So we need that. We need confidence. And by the way, we mentioned a couple of things. So time and confidence. We just did podcasts on those. So if you haven't heard those are we'll I think publish that confidence one next week, or the previous week. This will come out later. But confidence, you build that up, and then you said do the work. I love that as a second step, because a lot of times I had multiple people that told myself what to do, or told me what to do, told my parents, and a lot of times it was hard to be consistent. So, when you deal with an expert and somebody gives you advice, take it to heart, work at it, and especially with a family, some of these things, breathing is absolutely vital. And For me, earlier you had mentioned, you know, 90% of the people can't sleep. With autism, you were mentioning there's people on the spectrum. I know that for me, there weren't a lot of great ways to get to sleep. I always struggled with that. One thing that made it way worse was being panicked or going to sleep with anxiety, going to sleep not knowing what I was supposed to do, or having unknowns. So, we're all different. So different things are going to set us off. But I do remember, of course, my sleep was even more disturbed based on, again, like our topic, the ability to stay calm. Things that have helped me: working out consistently, same sleep schedule, making sure you go to bed at the same time, wake up at the same time. It doesn't matter if you're on vacation, doesn't matter if it's a day off, just always do that. Another big one for me is, limiting alcohol has been very beneficial for me, because I think I used it more therapeutically, which it's a horrible therapy. It takes a toll on your body, and it doesn't continue to work as well, right? So
it exacerbates everything.
Exactly. So
what happens? Let me throw this in, and I'll give it right back to you. What happens with alcohol is it calms you. It promotes serotonin, and you start to feel smart. You relax, and then it drops it precipitously when it starts to wear off, and you crave more and you need more. And evidently, what it does is it leaves you being completely bereft of blood sugar, the ability to focus. The serotonin is dropped below where it should be, and it's a disaster. I stopped that a long time ago, and I'm much, much better off for it. That's fatal. Go ahead. I'm sorry, I interrupted you. Go ahead.
No, it's really important for people to know, because it feels like it works. And the problem with that is, and just, so people understand, with OCD and generalized anxiety, I take a benzodiazepine. So, doing, alcohol on top of that is extremely dangerous. So please always consult your physician. But one of the things that I actually noticed is, if I have, let's say, 2-3 glasses of wine, and I took my medication consistently, always at the same time, about 24 to 48 hours later, I typically started having slight panic attacks. They weren't as big, but I could start relying on those happening. So it drops big time. So, that definitely, it does not help. And, one of the things is, with confidence, to build confidence, and to get calm, some of the things that I had to do to even be able to learn to be calm was get medicated. There's nothing wrong with being on medication. And what happened was that medication allowed me the ability, just long enough to start kind of figuring out what might help me calm down. And then I could try to practice it. Because if you're not in that state that you can even practice it, it's not going to happen.
Well,
you can't do the work.
You can't do it. You can't repeat what you've never experienced.
Exactly. Perfectly stated. And that it's so frustrating, because all I wanted to do was be good. I wanted to be the best worker. I wanted to be a great human being. And I always ended up being aggressive, mean, I'd lose track of my list of what I was, is long, but it also shaped me. So I'm thankful for the things I went through. And that's very important too. And be patient with yourself as you're going through this process. For me, the calm, make sure, if you're, say, a job interview was such a great question, for me, change your perspective. That is something very powerful that I try to teach when I'm working with somebody. And that's like, if you're going to be out and presenting a project or in any kind of presentation in front of a bunch of people, we always think from the perspective of we have to please them. But when you're reading a book, this is the example I give. If you're reading a book, you're looking at the author isn't sitting there writing it, thinking about and worrying about every single person reading it. They're writing it because that's in their nature to do it, and they want to. It's something they need to produce. When you do a presentation, it's the same thing. What you're trying to do is draw people in. So if you think about it the other way, so the audience instead is really you're kind of playing with them, you're toying with them. If you're writing a book, you're trying to draw people in. If you're playing music, the same thing. It doesn't matter. If you're a performer, all of the things that excite us have peaks and valleys, and we have to play with those. So if you change it from you having to perform to suddenly those individuals are kind of, you're seeing how well you can play with the room. It becomes more of a game. So for me, perspective.
So true.
Well, and a lot, I got that from a couple of the things you'd taught me forever ago, which you had me work on changing my overall perspective on, a lot of things, including just being harsh on myself. There were a lot of times where you built up my confidence because I had none. I seemed confident, but I just was not at all. And you kind of saw through that.
Yeah, it was bravado. And so I can say this about that too. When I used to speak, and I spoke a lot, like sometimes 3-4 times a week after the book, and I went on a book tour, I could feel, and I know lots of people like me will relate to this. You stand up there and you can feel everybody. You can feel the room. And you're afraid that you're going to faint simply because the blood is flowing away from the brain to the heart. I used to disassociate, and I would kind of be able to fake it and get through it. But I was worried I was going to faint or have a heart attack. Never did. And I didn't know those techniques then either. But what I would do now is I might make a joke about being nervous, or, wow, this is intimidating. Give me a minute. Then I would look up. Absolutely get away from the stress. By pushing into it, it's going to make it worse. So you might just look up, take a couple of deep breaths so you're not hyperventilating, have a sip of water, slow the action down when you come back. And when you're talking, this is a good tip. Over enunciate your words. Like talk like a reporter on CNN or something. You just really talk slower with a lot of expression, and that buys you time, because one of the actual physical reactions is you're in a situation. It could be in front of a teacher, it could be a test, it could be a speaking engagement, it could be in front of your family talking at Thanksgiving. Whatever it is, your tendency, once you start to screw up and say the wrong things, is to go faster and to get away from the situation by completing it. Your instincts, God, I want to get through this. That's the worst thing you can do. Instead of going faster, go slower. And again, those eyes are huge looking up. It's huge. And the breathing is huge. And always don't drink like Coke or anything like that, which will make it worse. Drink some water with maybe a little relaxing stuff. There's a magnesium supplement called Calm, interestingly, and maybe have that in your water, but sip it so you don't get dehydrated and slow it down. If you try this, it will get better or stay the same at the worst, but it will not get worse.
I absolutely agree.
Yeah, if you go fast, you're screwed.
Well, and as we had mentioned kind of in our episode, kind of on how we perceive time, I loved how you said, slow it down. Once you start realizing that all of those people are there, not because you're, sitting there going to their place and performing. No, they're actually there to watch you slow it down, enjoy the moment. So often, I can't even count how many times I performed and, um, you know, presented, and never once did I enjoy doing it.
Oh yeah.
And that is one of the biggest regrets I had, because I didn't know how. I was so focused on perfection. And we'll get into perfectionism on a different episode. But for me, staying calm has been a long journey. It's taken me a long time. I'm 43 now, and I'd say it's taken me like 41 years. I think my struggles in my life helped, because I learned that I couldn't keep fighting. I couldn't like stay angry. I don't have the energy. No one does. And as soon as I learned to just let some things go, instead of being angry that somebody, slides in front of you, take a deep breath. Maybe they are in a rush. Maybe there's an emergency they have to deal with. Give people the benefit of the doubt. Breathe. There's no reason for the rage, the anger. And all of that comes from not just, as you said, right at the very beginning, look up, take a deep breath, meditate if you know how to do that. I definitely love mindfulness and just lots of different meditation recipes that you can look up online. And then, I like your looking up. That always helped me. So everyone listening, that was something really powerful. It helped. And, then sit back and enjoy the ride. Life's here for us we get more done when we accept who we are. And that's why we don't edit these, and we've made mistakes before and stuff, and we'll make many more, but that's part of life. Jump into it. And, the confidence, do the work, as Jeffrey said. I love that. Breathe. And then of course we can jump into anything. Please write to us. If you have questions, we will make short snippets of these as well when we take a break for a season, or a couple weeks, and I'll start working on those. So I have short versions of these as well for people to listen to. But thank you, everyone. Jeffrey, do you have anything to add before I close up?
Yeah, I think we did a nice job.
Okay, well, it's always an honor, and thank you so much for taking your time and sharing this information with people out there, those that are listening. And parents, please feel free to reach out to us. You can find our information and where to reach us on, I think, like on the show notes on Spotify and some of the other ones. And again, please feel free to do so. And don't ever feel shameful that you have to seek help. I liked what Jeffrey said earlier in this episode, which was a learning difference. I like the thinking difference instead of disabled. I don't like that word. I love that you use that. So don't take any shame. They just have talents that are in different places, and that's what you need to focus on. So best to everybody. Thank you so much for listening. We will be back in the next week. Take care. Bye.
Sure.
Thank you so much for listening to Chaos2Cured podcast. If you enjoyed the show, please share it with everyone you know, and definitely like, follow, and subscribe. Certainly leave a comment if you'd like. Let us know what you'd like us to talk about the next time. Also, in our show notes, there should be direct links where you can follow us on our social media, as well as reach out to us directly. Thanks again, and have a great day. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed on Chaos2Cured podcast are the speaker's own. All discussion is based on our own experiences. We do not and cannot guarantee the accuracy or completeness of any information. Chaos2Cured podcast cannot give medical or health advice. All discussion is based upon our personal experiences and meant for general and educational purposes. This podcast is not a substitute for professional help or for diagnostic purposes for yourself or another. Chaos2Cured podcast always encourages you to consult an appropriate professional.